Okay, we're recording.
Excellent. Okay, here we are with Matt Sterbenz from WNDR Alpine. Wanted to check in with you, Matt, and have you tell us a little bit about WNDR Alpine and why you chose to go with microalgae.
Yeah, well, Connor, certainly I appreciate the invite to connect. It's, I would say, less frequent you and I get to chat during the summer months, knowing you're busy farming and homesteading. And I'm down here fighting off all the metropolitan buzz of Salt Lake City. So yeah, we're psyched to connect with you today and yeah, explore all these unique topics to WNDR Alpine and my purpose in the universe today, which seemingly is to usher in new materials that are opening up a bounty of performance opportunity without any of the degradation to humanity and our precious planet. And when I think about why algae, I mean, I kind of interpret algae as just like why biotechnology, why microorganisms, why not petroleum, why not all these other century-old solutions to the industrial complexities that we rely on so heavily in our day-to-day lives. And to point it to microalgae is fitting, but I feel like almost too specific. Why renewable? And honestly, I feel because it's the most sustainable approach that we have to making a long-lasting contribution, a contribution that's longer lasting than our lifetime. And it's not the capital S sustainability. It's sustainability in context of longevity. It's the true root of the word. What is sustainable? How long can we continue to do it this way before we're forced to pivot? And we've got a lot of variables that impact our decisions today and why we choose to build on certain foundations. And honestly, with my storied past in alpine ski design and general enthusiasm around skiing, the previous foundation was built to spec, and it was limiting to my enthusiasm long term. Growing a business in the past where I'm sourcing suppliers that all relatively show up in the same way. I'm talking big steel building factories with dumpsters, serving the perimeter, waste productivity that's 50% of the finished good, supply chains that are like multi-decade monopolized, where everyone's building out of the exact same materials, which subsequently leads to everybody mimicking the exact same processes in how the products are built, and the subsequent wastefulness that comes of these decade-old processes of profiling these rigid extruded materials. It wasn't going to be a long and providing future for me in the way that I was operating in the past. I was motivated to prove product design philosophy. I was in the past motivated to incorporate athletes in a meaningful way that I felt truly did service and honored them for their unique ways in contributing to product. But I was totally disenfranchised with the way that product was being built and the standards at which we were being held to build the product similarly. We sought to build product initially out of clever solutions, using clever solutions out of unique facilities, and we couldn't appease the consumer expectation, both in terms of timeliness and in quality. And so we threw our hands up and said, well, we need to go find the biggest factory that will have us, and we'll rely on them and their know-how and their, you know, century aged excellence in engineering to deliver quality product to us, but out of our dimensions. And that solution, while valuable, had a finite amount of time where it served relevancy until your product looks just like everybody else's product. And, you know, having a 15-year-old heritage didn't necessarily stack up to the 100-year plus heritage of a rosin mill, for example.
Right.
So trying to defend your uniqueness based on your adolescent heritage fell flat for a lot of consumers, and we didn't see the growth we needed to. So when given an opportunity to, you know, pursue a new approach in ski building, relying on a material application that is rooted in something completely outside of what we had been historically relying upon, and how that material would truly provide unique solutions to processing and consciousness around wastefulness, all the while being rooted in a renewable resource that we could defend, now having some true data points around how our materials in complete composition stack up against other companies' products using more, I don't know, carbon inducing outputting materials than that of our own. Like, it's a real value proposition. And I feel like the foundation that we have in serving the ski audience with Wonder Alpine, as benefit by the foundation Checker Spot provides with access to oils from microalgae, is considerably stronger than the foundations of which I've had the opportunity to build on in the past. And that was really why algae, and why to start Wonder Alpine. You know, it's a loaded question, clearly one I've given a lot of thought to, Connor. And I think it's really unassuming for people to discover material applications derived from microalgae in skiing. But when you think about all of the different componentry that go into making modern day backcountry skis and snowboards, like, oil plays a role in the support of all of those polymers that make up those products. And algae makes a superior oil that gives us tunable performance that can exceed what we have been relying upon in the past, for which is not differentiated brand to brand. So it kind of makes a lot of sense, even though it's the most unassuming material specification you may think to discover in winter sports.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for me, when I first heard about Wonder Alpine, like, I was looking for something different. I'd been skiing on various skis, and I had skied on wood cord skis, and I really enjoyed them. And then I skied a carbon ski, and then, similar to you, I was like looking for something beyond the status quo. And when I heard about, well, you can actually like choose a ski that is better and is, you know, doing better, it was a no-brainer for me. And I've just been really excited about what you guys have been doing down there. It's pretty cool to see, and the evolution over a number of years now.
Yeah, well, and we feed off of the enthusiasm of others.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of need that validation that what we're doing is really resonating with people, and
Yeah.
that excitement we get from others really helps, like, empower the team's morale. You know, so we're psyched that it's landing well with people, and they're feeling the benefit, like we believe it's supporting.
So how can you tell me a little bit more how the combination of wood and algal core and the spiral plate that you've been using in the ski construction, you know, is performing or contributing to a higher level of performance than the status quo?
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, I can't remember when I skied on non-wood core skis. I know there was a point in time, maybe there was, I don't know. I know my first rosin skis were sandwich construction, you know.
Right.
They probably had negative side cut. Well, they were certainly straight, and they had a rooster on the tip. And they were probably wood core skis because they didn't really have foam at the time.
Right.
Which now dates me a bit, so I'll digress. But you know, in my storied past of building skis, certainly made a lot of junior skis out of foam. And foam was a 4-letter word, you know, when Dynastar Big came out with fat ski, when Dynastar came out with the Big, which was one of the first most prolific fat skis, that and like, you know, the Volant had the Chub,
Yep.
which had its own set of problems, which led to reverse camber, which actually proved to be a really insightful era of ski design. But you know, the ski that I think about the most is the Dynastar Big, and it integrating foam in the core. Obviously, you know, the engineers are thinking, wow, this ski is nearly twice the width of a standard ski, you know,
Right.
64 millimeters. And, you know, I don't know how big bigs were. They're probably 100 underfoot, and we thought they were the biggest skis in the world. But, you know, let's just think that they were 128 or whatever millimeters wide and twice the width of a normal ski. So of course they consider lightweight material alternatives like foam. Well, unfortunately for them, like the people who were enthusiastic about these skis wanted to jump off the biggest cliff at the resort. Naturally, the pressure underneath the binding area was greater than any potential wood core ski could withstand at the time, let alone a wood foam hybrid core, which would almost always shear at the heel piece of the ski upon impact. And so, you know, I always adored the feeling of a wood core ski. I think partly because it was just ingrained in what I thought to be my connection to the ski. That was the sensation, the frequency that I tuned into when I was skiing on my favorite skis down my favorite ski run. And it was that response, that relationship where I was feeling the ski flex under my foot, and the way the tips were interacting with the change in snow condition, and the way those tails released. Like that was, for me, the confidence that inspired me to want to pursue skiing at a high level. And I would never, ever give that up. And that is like, you know, that is truly severing the nervous system as a skier in losing that connection. And, you know, when you talk about this composite core that we've arrived to using algae foam in combination with domestically sourced hardwood like aspen, we're able to still maintain that sensitivity, that nervousness that we're so desperate to connect with, without the overwhelming burden of excess frequency. Because you think if you have 100% wood core ski, you're likely covering your frequency connectivity, that nervousness in spades. You're feeling every single bit of everything that ski is undergoing in terms of flexural properties and deflection and all that. And adding in the foam as a stringer in complement to the wood running tip to tail, we haven't lost the critical mass of connectivity to that nervousness of the ski. We've retained that with that wood composition, but we've accentuated it with a cellular material, a foam derived from microalgae. Why microalgae? Well, I mean, the foam itself is a great complement to the core design. The microalgae just makes the foam a lot less harmful to the overall construct of the actual core, because it's not a petroleum-based foam. So granted, we're taking biological wood out of the ski and putting in a % of biological ingredient foam in, but it's better than putting in 100% petroleum with a heavy carbon dioxide equivalent footprint with it. So it's a lesser of the evil. But the cellular material is actually a really nice addition to the sensations we're seeking in skis, because that cellular material is a great insulary of frequency, right? When we think about how we dress our homes or line the interiors of our vehicles, we use foam in a vibration or as an acoustic frequency deadening or dampening way. And that same sensation complements that of the fibrous materials of the wood. So we're still able to feel that nervousness, that connectivity to the ski, but without being overburdened with excess frequency that we simply just don't need. And we're benefited by the lightweighting nature of that foam. So it helps kind of calm some of the excess frequencies. It helps lightweight what otherwise would be a relatively dense and heavy wood core. And that's reason being why we ultimately chose to come to market with the algal core. And we use the term algal, ALGAL, as just a way in which how we speak of a material derived from oils of microalgae. So it could be a little bit confusing nomenclature, algae, algal, but that's kind of how we refer to it. And when we came to market, that's how we ultimately chose to coin the name, the algal composite core, because it was a composition of both this algal rigid foam and this domestically sourced hardwood, which was at the time a combination of aspen and poplars. And now we've just chosen to just dedicate the core species to aspen. Seems to be the most consistent and abundant resource to work with. And then, of course, if you're going to run foam, which we use in about a 12 to 13 millimeter width profile, left and right of the center aspen stringer of the core, we're then running essentially parallel lines down the core where you would otherwise be relying on the binding screws to go into to hold the binding affixed to the surface of the ski. And what we know about foam is that it doesn't have nearly the integrity of the hardwood. So how do we get around that? Well, you know, from my past life, we've always had the answer to this issue. And in some ways, we would integrate a piece of aluminum in the composition of the laminates. And obviously, aluminum has great retention for binding screws. We'd also introduce single grain hardwood, where we didn't end up having seams that the screws would be screwing through. It was a single grain uniform piece of hardwood that the screws would screw into the face of. And therefore, we were able to establish a acceptable amount of screw retention. We measure retention with ski cores on the basis of how much force it takes to pull the screw halfway embedded in the core vertically out of the ski. And so while we did integrate initially, once we came to market with the Algo composite core, a single grain piece of maple, we eventually made a capital investment in a machine that would grind up all of the post-laminate flashings from the skis. So if you think about a ski, it's anything but dimensionally uniform, right? They're almost all of unique lengths within a millimeter or two. And they're always going to have some side cut to them. So they're never uniform as a rectangle. But when we laminate these skis, irrespective of how we dress the cores, irrespective of how we dress the edges and the base material, there's always going to be uniform material that comes off a roll that only some percent stays within the confines of the ski perimeter. So we're deflashing is how we call it, using a bandsaw to remove cured composites, in this case, also some wood, some polyurethane, and top sheet with every pair of skis we make. And this material, with the exception of base and edge, is every bit as valuable as what's in the inside that ski. So the guts of this ski is worth $1,000. And there's that 50% wastefulness of the manufacturing process that's made of the exact same quality materials that's now garbage. And it's a thermoplastic composition of fiberglass, wood, and plastic that is not going to biodegrade anytime soon. So how do we get around that in using it to our advantage? We bought a machine that essentially grinds up these long cured composite strands into a 5 millimeter or smaller particulate. It essentially becomes the composition of like pulp or like sawdust. But we know because of the composition of all the glass and nylon and urethane and wood that it's anything but just sawdust. It's really strong aggregate. And so we build molds that we surface fill with this material reconstituted with new virgin bio-based epoxy that creates a new cured composite, dimension, set in thickness and in perimeter to embed into the face of that core. And so now we've eliminated the need for a slow growing, non-highly renewable wood species like maple for its single grain insert, and instead swap that out with what we call the spiral plate, or a spiral made product that we make using our waste stream and new virgin bio-based epoxy. And so it's kind of cool that like every pair of skis we make, the waste of that ski goes in to form virgin inputs to the next ski. And the same with boards. Rather than relying on these plates for ski bindings, we build insert packs that we can pre-build with a variety of single size inserts that just simply drop into the face of the snowboard cores. And as you know, snowboards, they need 4 inserts or 4 packs of inserts for every board. So it's actually quite a bit of material and has proven to be a fun engineering challenge as to how to mold these components specific to these dimensions while elevating the performance that we would otherwise be, held back from. Like in the context of skis, obviously binding pullout could be an issue. Working with this really cool, strong aggregate and repurposing the substance from production waste gives us superior strength than what we were able to achieve with the maple. So much so that we were actually even able to thin the actual insert out more so than we were relying on the thickness of the maple, which now just leaves more of the true uniform core thickness in place. So we're getting greater flexural properties of the ski because the composite footboard or the spiral plate doesn't have longitudinal rigidity like maple does. You know, pretty would bend the face of a maple cabinet, right? Like you could slam a cabinet maple door and it's most likely going to uniformly shut and slap. Whereas if you take like an 1/8 inch, thick piece of particle board, most likely that cabinet board is going to snap or it's going to flex. And that added forgiveness in its longitudinal structural integrity allows the ski to flex more genuinely. And so historically with the maple, we were actually seeing a dead spot in our flex curves because of how rigid that maple insert was. And now with the spiral plate, we're seeing a nice uniform bell curve where the ski's flexural properties have been elevated as a result of this composite not being so structurally rigid in that regard. It's stronger for binding screw retention, but it's not nearly as restricting in terms of flexural properties. And while we don't see the flexural property needs with boards, we do have the issue with inserts spinning. So if you over tighten your insert, you could, or if you over tighten your binding, you could potentially spin the insert that's embedded in the board. And in this regard, by building an actual preset binding insert pack, we've channeled the backside so that the inserts index in a ledge that will not allow the actual insert to spin inside the board. So we've been able to optimize for torque as well as pull strength for boards as well as skis.
That's pretty sweet to have that work out like that, hey?
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, we have committed to becoming a B Corp certified brand. And a big part of becoming B Corp certified is vetting a couple of innovative business modules. And where we focused our energy in the application process, which requires annual updates, but 3-year recertification, is in integrating bio-based or renewable materials. And then secondarily was reduction in waste stream. And we knew if we were able to achieve one, we'd get the other. And so Spiral Made really makes us whole in reducing wastefulness. And obviously integrating the checker spot algal oils and creating cast urethanes and rigid foams got us a seat at the table in terms of use of bio-based ingredients that otherwise were not being present in ski or snowboard construction. And so those first use cases of these unique, highly renewable materials got us a seat at the table. And then we backed that up by identifying processes that would help us eliminate a lot of the wastefulness that comes from otherwise profiling extruded sheets of plastic for sidewall in favor of this liquid polymer cast urethane we developed. And then being able to now consume a bit of the production waste and making these Spiral Made parts is like further validation that when you change the core ingredients, you're able to unlock manufacturing efficiencies that were otherwise unattainable.
That's great to see that you guys are trying to figure out a way to streamline your waste like that. Because I mean, that's thing, like the ski industry definitely is like a high use and high intensity sort of industry. Could you tell me a little bit about the skis that are coming out this season?
Yeah. Well, we've been busy. We've taken on a lot of feedback from our internal and external community. Seems as though the goalposts were wide enough. When we came to market, we brought a 110 waist ski. People that ski with Yukon or probably appreciate a ski waist width that wide. And certainly Pet Fugis, who I brought on shortly thereafter launching the brand, thought we could even go wider. And so we set sights on a 120. A consequence of a consumer survey and some early stakeholders actually challenged our opinion in that we should make our second ski so wide. So we ended up coming to market the second year with a 100 waist, which we call the Vital. And then finally, the third year, we were able to make the Reason 120, which was a ski that we essentially had intended to make in the second year, but got pushed out to the third because of consumer demand. Fair enough. We thought we had the goalposts covered. We had 100, 110, and 120, and we were just going to continue to optimize around those three dimensions. Well, then we connected with this uphill lunatic, Paul Greenwood, out of the the coastal range. And he creates a very convincing argument as to why we need a more capable, long travel, high alpine ski. So, having a bit of humility in the process of designing ultimately the Reason 120, we felt as though we should at least explore this opportunity to make a sub 90 waist ski. So we started on a kind of apology inspired co-developed product, ultimately titled the Nocturne 88. And this is a new model for us that kind of speaks to a consumer segment that's looking for longer days, bigger mileage, potentially mixed carrying, right? So we're ski touring, we're cramponing, we're ski carrying. We're definitely seeking ridge top objectives. And then we're skiing tight technical terrain where we need strong stiffness for weight, strong stiffness for length ratios, and yet something that is still powerful enough that will drive us down big descents. And so we kind of look at it as like, not necessarily a ski, because we're not talking about like breaking the barriers of weight reduction, but we are trying to open up the boundaries of what's possible in terms of ski descent. There's too many lightweight ski objectives being fulfilled, and then like etch-a-sketch turns down the skin track. We want to like put in a decent line off the top and a ski that needs to be capable of supporting that. So we kind of look at it, instead of ski-mo, it's more like free-mo. And it's definitely high mobility, but it's also free ride inspired. And so the Nocturne 88 essentially kind of like, it widens our goalpost, and it opens up an additional 10 millimeter increment to what otherwise is the range of skis. So now we have an 88 Nocturne. We have updated the Vital 100 to being the Vital 98, which not most notably is the 2 mil reduction underfoot, but more so is the deepening of the side cut, making the skis turning radius a bit quicker. So now the ski has a little bit more maneuverability at a wider variety of speeds. And similar to how we reduced the waist width of the Intention to a 108 last year, we also optimized the sizing of the Vital, like we did with the Intention, by reducing the margin between sizes to 6 centimeters rather than 7. And so we're able to land a couple of extra lengths in brackets where we have consumer demands unfulfilled. So like with the Intention, we had only a 185. And so that was in the 110s. When we made the Intention 108, we updated the size range to have a 182 and a 188. And so subsequently, we've also been able to do that for the Vital. Rather than having only the 183, we now have a 183 and a 189, which actually could be really interesting for you, Connor. And then we stepped down 6 centimeters from there, which ultimately leaves us a little short of our shortest previous length. We're only now at 59 versus 55, but we think there's still plenty of ski there for what it is. And so that's the notable updates, as well as a slight weight reduction for the Vital 98. The Intention 108 stays unchanged, as does the Reason 120. And then on the snowboard side, we've just introduced a second board series called the Shepherd, which is kind of a birth child of Nick Russell, who, when he came on, we had already pretty far along designs around the Bell series. So this is really the first project with him contributing to the snow category as a product line developer, to really introduce his ideas as to how to navigate through tight technical high alpine human power terrain. And so we're psyched to be introducing, in conjunction with the all new Nocturne and updated Vital, the all new Shepherd board series, both split and solid. A little bit narrower.
What are some of the highlights of that design with the Shepherd?
It's a little bit narrower than the Bell. The Bell's average waistline is about a 26. Whereas the average waistline of the Shepherd is like 25.5. So a little bit quicker, edge to edge underfoot. equally directional, but even more so taper than with the bells. The bells taper, and when we talk board taper, we're talking about the difference between the width of the nose and the width of the tail. And the bell series, all throughout the whole size range, each benchmark at 10 mils. So know that always you're going to have a 10 millimeter wider nose and tail, regardless of length. With the Shepherd, we actually deviate away from that standardized taper, and we allow the taper to increase upwards to 22 millimeters from nose to tail in the 166, which is the longest length. And then it steps down about 4 millimeters as you get down into narrower sizes. So we're talking about a pretty broad nose with a nice long scoop, and then a really like kind of tight and round tail with a fair bit of taper. So really leaning into that directional feel where you can really curve the board. It's got kind of like a pointy nose, a little bit of a Craig Kelly air inspired nose on the board. And then this like really cool, almost like classic popsicle stick tail, but doesn't have like a real big kick like a twin tip board would have. It's a bit more low rise. So it allows the board to kind of pivot back foot in tight terrain while still maintaining good float and soft snow and in bigger, broader terrain. So we initially went after the design to be kind of more like a higher alpine complement to that of like how we would perceive the vital in relation to the intention on the ski side. You know, the intention in the bell being kind of the center post, and thinking that the new Shepherd would be a lot like a vital, just quicker, more nimble. But actually with this nose, it has some tendencies to really float nice and deep snow. So you'll see a lot of the marketing coming out in kind of defense of that riding style with Nick this fall.
That's interesting. I shifted to skiing a narrower ski that I skied most of the season on the Vital last year, just because I had a
Wow.
ton of guiding work lined up, and
Yeah.
I think there was one stretch where I did like 41 out of 45 days in a row there, and
Cool.
I couldn't believe how well the Vital. I mean, I did believe because I saw it, but the Vital is just an absolute pow shredding machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you know, with the reverse camber setup, and I skied it in the 190 length, like
Mhm.
it floated in POW incredibly well. And
Yeah.
then at the same time, it was just a little bit less weight than trucking around in a bigger ski that allowed
Mhm.
me to do big vertical with my guests. And yeah, I was really, really happy with the way the Vital skied last year, and so much to the
Nice.
so that I skied on it pretty much every day last winter.
That's awesome. What binding were you using for that?
I was using the ATK Trofeo. Yeah, so they're ultralight race binding.
Wow, that's a
And
nice
so the
flight mindset.
combination.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was really psyched on how it performed, and you know, it was people would be like, "You're skiing 100 underfoot," and I was like, "Yeah, why? I mean, when it skis well, you don't need
Mhm.
a massive ski. I mean, sure, it's fun to surf on top of it, but you know, if it's designed properly, you still can surf on top of it, which was a real interesting revelation towards me for me,
Yeah.
because I've certainly skied a fair bit on the Reasons and the Intentions, and I do love those skis as well. But just, you know, as an aging ski guide, sometimes you got to cut some weight here and there.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, we have seen cannibalization of the wider ski category as a result of these reverse camber narrower profiles. You
Right,
know, when we open up the intention to both camber and reverse, and then followed suit with the vital, and eventually also for the reason, you know, we saw people whose like, you know, playful pow surfy feels were being fulfilled with the 108 reverse camber. They didn't feel like they needed to be on a ski any wider. Like, how much more float do you need? And honestly, like personally, I prefer the widest ski we make in camber, because you're absolutely right. The dimensions themselves alone gives plenty of flotation. You don't need the addition of reverse camber, and you can actually use a little bit of that camber underfoot to help in stopping power, especially when
right,
you get into aprons where you're dealing with debris flow or change in aspect and you're dealing with some windboard. It's kind of nice to have a reverse camber bite in the tail when you got to shut her down. And
right.
I'll choose and favor all of the reverse camber shapes in the narrower profiles because of that same float that you're experiencing. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't our intention to build a ski that was kind of so unique. Like I can't think of any two manufacturers right now that make a ski that's 100 or narrower underfoot that's reverse camber.
Hmm.
And it just ended up being, because we had already kind of set that as a design parameter going into expanding the collection, that every ski would get a couple of different looks at camber profile. Did we end up with the Vital reverse? And that ended up being probably the most surprising and equally one of the most now capable skis for backcountry ski touring, because you do get a lot of float, but you still have the nimbleness of a narrower profile, and you have the nice light weighting benefit because you just don't have the dimensional mass to deal with.
Mhm.
And you get away with lightweight bindings like you're talking about. Same with me. I put ATKs on mine. It's a killer setup, and I can run lightweight boots too, which is even lighter now. So I'm not being
Yeah.
held to an Alpine hybrid 140 to push a big dimension ski down the mountain. I can go with a lighter weight Dynafit boot and pair it with a mountaineering binding and be able to like kind of stay fit throughout the day.
Yes. Yes. Now, how about the Nocturne? What sort of profiles are available in that this year?
Yeah, well, we managed to get the development process through the one profile, which is camber with a bit of rocker tip and tail. I mean, it's not absent rocker, it does have rise, but certainly we wanted to rely on getting as much effective edge for the length of the ski as possible. Again, thinking about how we're having to like really rely on this ski in a multi-travel use way. We don't want to be lugging up skis that are going to have a bunch of non-usable side cut to ridgetop terrain that we're going to need a good bite to hold on to the mountain. So we ran out our geometries, so we got pretty conventional, side cut through tip and tail into the ski. We did add a fair bit of early rise, both in tip and tail, so we get some float. And this is a little bit easier to initiate turns and funky changing, kind of like, a firm to breakable snow conditions. Like it's really hard to ski breakable crust with a classically cambered ski, because once the ski dives below that breakable crust, it's hard to get it to come back up. Just
100%.
just a touch of early rise just gives you a fighting chance to see those tips again, before you got to tuck it in. So we did deviate a little bit this year in introducing the Nocturne in the single camber profile. I don't know. I mean, I would like to think that there's still a way forward, that there's demand to build that ski in a reverse camber, but honestly, like the market trends don't tell us that. As much as you and I can sit here and talk about how much we adore the feel of that reverse camber Vital, the numbers say that 80% of consumers prefer that ski in camber over reverse.
Right.
We're in business. This isn't Matt's ski shop, and I just get to design skis for myself and friends. We're here to try to create impact and get these materials out in the world and create exposure and reduce scarcity around alternative renewable oils. And we have so many other things we're seeking to accomplish with this brand. And like redefining the ski or the consumer ski expectation dynamic, it's just not the game that we're in business to play. It was a little bit more about that for me with Forefront in my history past, or storied past, I should say. But in context of this project, like we really want to just defend award-winning geometries with modern, innovative materials. And we want to give you a ski experience that's as good, if not better, than what you've had, and do it with a material that totally awakens the senses. And you're like, holy shit, this ski's awesome. And it's derived from microalgae. Like that's a heightened state of emotion. And that connection to something truly innovational and unique will indeed have a positive impact on the experience. And so, we got to be careful not to tweak the ski world too much, because that's an opportunity for another brand. But we still do need to create the most efficient and most enjoyable platform for what it is. And I think we have at least met that objective with the current camber profile, the Nocturne 88. Time will tell if we make it an alternative camber, but that may be the one unique ski in the range that doesn't see both profiles. And then Next year, we're also already looking at updating the reason, being that we haven't already looked to bring that waistline down a little bit, much as we have for both the Vital and the Nocturne now, or I'm sorry, the Vital and the Intention. The reason still sits at the 120, which, you know, if you look at the line, you would expect that to narrow down to 118. We may even surpass that reduction and go even narrower by a little. And we're considering now also bringing in a little bit different design philosophy, making that ski more twin tipped. And,
Oh, wow.
and the reason being is, if you think about it, like I said earlier, you know, and maybe this is getting a little off topic, but I feel like it's important for the kind of the way that we're talking about ski design, and that these directional guns that are like 108 to 112 underfoot, especially with like a fair bit of early rise or even reverse camber like we offer, like those skis float amazingly well. You really are not struggling to stay atop any snowpack, wet or dry, crusty or not, with skis of that dimension, with that profile. So how do you make sense of the ski that's 120 that has the same directionality? And people say, I'm not fighting for float. What else does this ski offer? It's like, well, I mean, float's the primary reason why it's this wide. So when we think about how do skis still be relied on in that kind of waistline in backcountry terrain, it's primarily freestyle, you know, and it's people who are skiing in unconventional ways, who are looking to ski backwards, who are looking to play with terrain in a way that's different than your traditional approach without ski touring, you know. And this is even the challenge to the way in which we dress the skis, you know. This is where we start to see that true demand for a hybrid boot and binding combination, you know, where we want that 140 flex boot because it gives us that alpine confidence, and we need that marker Duke compatibility where I can go touring, but I can also lock into a 16 DIN Alpine, you know, ramp angle binding.
Right.
Because I'm gonna trick off of this feature, you know, and you know, we sit here and we look at Marcus Etter's, you know, edits and whatnot, and we imagine someday being able to ski like that. Let me tell you, like his equipment is not lightweight. His equipment is very capable, and it's World Cup caliber.
Right.
And so, you know, to be able to emulate that kind of riding style, we need to be cognizant of like, what do we need in our equipment? And we certainly do need a greater rise in our tail kicks of our skis, and we do need to maintain waist width, because you're going to need that added bounce and buoyancy in soft terrain when not skiing just conventionally downhill, you know. So that's a way that we're looking to bring new life into the reason. It should also like authentically open up our target audience a little bit to speak to that crowd, which I don't feel like we have done a great job in doing since we launched. I mean, we've been out for now 4 years. And so there's certainly opportunity to open up the conversation to a broader audience, both in the Fremo context with the Nocturne, but now also with, you know, the prospect of updating the reason to being something a bit more freestyle oriented, which is a small but servable market down the road. And then in connection to that, also building a third board in complement to the Bell and Shepherd that will also speak to more of that directional twin consumer, you know, who's looking to ride a board that has the capability, that true twin symmetry and dimension, not that 22 mil taper we were talking about with the Shepherd, or even the 10 mil taper with the Bell, but a true twin. But still, you know, directional in its mindset and still backcountry in terms of its spirit, but just capable of serving that more crossover freestyle category. And this, I feel like, will at least pay homage to the growing backcountry community, and put a little bit of distance between us and the lightweight weenie conversation, which is like, oh, but you can just make all those skis just like a lot more lighter. And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, there's performance needs that need to be met beyond just reducing weight, I feel, to own this category. And, you know, that's our space. Wonder Alpine is human power. We're backcountry focused. And so we don't want to alienate audiences that are out there enjoying, you know, the bounty of the backcountry because we don't make the product for it.
No, I think that touches on a good point, is that the backcountry community is made up of many different smaller micro cultures within it. And
Yeah.
if you can create a product that appeals to everybody or each facet of the backcountry community, then that's going to work well for your brand.
Yeah.
Like you just touched on it. I mean, Wander is human powered, is backcountry. If you could sum that up in a brief statement, like how is that the case?
Well, I mean, tread light, charge hard. I feel like that embodies our spirit in a lot of ways as an outdoor brand. We honestly just don't need the burden of being relying upon mechanized travel. It adds layers of complexity, logistically speaking. It makes our approach to terrain far more exclusive than it should be. And I believe it also leads to some irresponsible decision making, because we're not able to actually analyze the mountain for its state that it's in. We're going basically from map to mechanized mode of travel to descent, and we haven't even yet started the conversation with the mountain itself. So a lot of people say, oh, this backcountry skiing bit, that's really risky. Like, you guys are real risk takers. And I'm like, you have any idea how much time I spend walking through snow every day I go skiing? I go, by the time I have gotten to the ridge line, I know everything about that snowpack, and I've been able to calibrate decisions that are far more in tune with the conditions than I would otherwise if I had been given some mechanized bump to the ridge line, or even just like blatantly relied on a ski patroller to clear a terrain slope for me because I trust the services they offer. Like, no disrespect to the professional services and all the mechanized modes of travel that we have available to us today. That's great skiing, and I love doing it just as much as the next guy. But in terms of, like, if you ask me, man, you got one day on this world to live, pick your day. What do you want to do? I'm walking uphill. I'm straight up walking uphill. I'm not heli skiing. There's so much more I get from that experience of connecting with the mountain and making my way through the day. I don't lack ski time. I'm actually skiing more than anybody else because I'm in my skis all day long. The only time I'm not skiing is when I'm transitioning from skins to downhill. Other than that, like, I'm either standing on my skis, sitting on my skis, or skiing on my skis. And so I'm very fulfilled with the experience. I feel like it brings in new opportunity to analyze terrain, to further advance our skills, and it creates a more well-rounded, connection with nature, because we're not distracted by all this chaos that comes with mechanized resources. So, sure, I'll take a heli bump out to a lodge, but I'm not sad to see that helicopter fly away, and I'm not asking to get out early before we get to the lodge so that I can ski down the slope to the outhouse. I'm good. I'll walk up there when time's right. So again, I'm getting older too, so this is a more mature approach, and I get it. It's not for everybody yet, but I can assure you, anybody who wants that heightened experience and is willing to put in the work, their takeaway is going to sound a lot like this.
Yes. Have you noticed a increase in well, I guess intention and understanding of the backcountry through the Wander Roost programs and the rendezvous programs that you did last year?
Yeah, I mean, we have introduced backcountry skiing to a lot of new users. And I'm going to flag this by saying that's not our intent. We're not the brand for that. We don't have the history and the resources and the time and energy to be introducing new users to the backcountry. There's a lot of great programs out there that can support those introductory experiences without having to come through the lane of a brand like WNDR Alpine, who's primarily focused on introducing renewable bio-based materials in thoughtfully designed product. Like, great, we'd love to have our skis part of that experience for you, but the intention of those programs is not particularly to introduce new users to the backcountry, even though it has proven to do so. We're prideful of that. We're not indexing that as a metric of our success. Rather, our goal is to get a higher level of fluency around backcountry etiquette and decision making. We're trying to introduce backcountry skiers who are snowboarders to understand the value of professional guide services. We're trying to introduce them to a more methodical approach to backcountry that's going to serve to be more long-standing and beneficial for them and their families. And there's been a major disconnect between I'm going to park on the side of the road and walk up there and risk my life skiing that face, to I'm going to go through the process of getting the permit, parking in the right place, meeting my guide, and spending my entire day in terrain I've never set sights on. And then only to find myself at dusk come back to the car with a lifelong lasting memory. And I've had the opportunity to network with people and places that provide those experiences. And when we initiate these events through WNDR Alpine, like the Outpost Tour or like the Roost, that's a sampling of what we are ultimately trying to convey. And so while we're psyched to introduce backcountry skiing to people, like it's actually better for us to find a way to inform people how to get into the sport on their own. And once they discover a level of comfort and proficiency, let us show you like a heightened experience through more meticulous product design and how to maybe set yourself up for greater success with product as well as with people and services available to you. And so we're psyched to be able to network with professionals throughout the industry to help provide these experiences for our consumers, as well as go and enjoy those experiences alongside them so that we can learn more about how the product is resonating in terms of fitting their needs and performance expectations.
Excellent.
Yeah. But we're going to continue doing events because we see that there's a growing demand for them. And like networking with you, Connor, and others in the professional community, like this has become the fabric of who we are as a brand. And, you know, my storied past was largely built around people on the top step of the podium and how to integrate their thoughtfulness in product design. That's great, but those relationships are highly exclusive. You know, these are people who I'm privileged to even have their cell phone numbers to, because they're so freaking popular because of what they have done on skis or boards, right? That doesn't really create a connectivity back to community. And working with professionals like yourself, this opens up the door for us to interact with your entire network. And that network starts to then butterfly effect to the other community. And throughout that experience, we're now becoming connected through something that's more longstanding, that's more intimate. And I feel like I'm more motivated to engage in activities where I can meet new people and have new experiences rather than just talk about who I got to hang out with.
Yeah, that was quite the tour that you guys went on last winter. Like you were kind of all over the place there.
You know what's also cool about like committing to a tour is that we're going to be here on this day at this time doing this thing. And
yes,
like we're not saying we're going to be skiing this line, you know, like, but we are saying we're going to be skiing on the Blackcomb Glacier on this day. And it's either going to be, you know, can't see your hand in front of your face, or it's going to be Bluebird and Boot Top Pow. Either way, we're going to be there. We'll see you there. And that's the only way to string a tour together. Like you can't be weather dependent on your tour. And with so many destinations on the list and, you know, essentially being somewhere different every day, we skied so many different looks of the Rocky Mountain range. It was fantastic. And to think that like you would maybe decide not to do something, you know, because of the weather, like we didn't have that scope of expectation. We would just ride lower elevation terrain, or we'd hang out in the forest where we could have greater viz. Like those just became bits of information that helped guide us through our day. But there was one day down in Bend, Oregon, where I opened the door, the damn thing almost flew off the hinges. And there's people just so psyched to go skiing. And I'm like, you guys are freaking mental, let's go. And we just start walking into the wind. And, you know, towards the end of the day, the last thing that I remember was how windy it was. And I can assure you, the wind never let up, not once.
Right.
But that's not my takeaway. My takeaway was how funny this guy was, or how funny she was, and this run we ski, And this terrain trap, we circumnavigated or whatever it was, I'm taking photos the whole time, and those are the memories I have, not because of the gusty winds that kept me potentially from even getting out of the car in the morning. But we feed off of other people too, which is rad.
That's great.
Yeah.
It looked like you had a variety of conditions on that trip. And
Yeah, we had every bit. And we left Powtown. Salt Lake, the Wasatch here, it was just in a cycle where the bottom couldn't get firm. It just kept snowing. No matter how much new snow, the bottom was always soft. We didn't really ever hit a hard bottom until like April. So every day we were getting 6 inches of snow. I saw some stat just the other day. Snowbird reported 51 powder days, which was 6 inches or more equivalents.
that's pretty sweet. That's a good winter.
51 days of the year was 6 inches or more. You
Yeah.
can't get a hard bottom with that kind of intermittent snow. And so we had to hit the road, and I watched the snow line go from like at the bumper to like high Alpine within 4 or 5 hours of driving north that day. Like by the time we got to central Idaho, the snow was gone from the foothills. And
wow.
I was unburying my house in the city almost every night prior to leaving. And I'm like driving through green prairies in southern Idaho. I'm like, holy shit, where are we going and why are we doing this? But you know what? While we may have never found deep snowpack until we returned home, we found a lot of great skiing.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like to hear, there's a saying that I think is really true that people need to keep in mind, is that there's no such thing as bad snow. There's just bad skiing. And when you embrace that mindset, you find that there's always an opportunity to better your turn and to make the best of the condition. Because if you're like, hey, you know what? There's no such thing as bad snow, just bad skiing. Like, I'm going to ski this run excellently. Like, you temper your approach, you slow down your pace, you intentionally set your edge, and you start linking turns. And towards the bottom, you're hollering just as loud as you would have had it been boot top pow, and your hands are dragging behind your hips, and you're just having a day, So I was psyched on the challenge and the opportunity to experience new zones, again, with wildly different snowpack than what we had at home, with a bunch of new people. So I'm up for next season for sure.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So you're going to continue with a similar program next year?
Yeah. We're going to expand it even, and we're going to create Outpost Tour that also has demo programs associated with it. So some zones we may not even do an actual guided ski tour. We may only show up for demos. So we're talking about making our way up through the Powder Highway, which could be where you and I get to cross paths early season, and then make our way down the western states, where we'll do a hybrid of both demo on one day and then maybe guided touring the next. So,
cool.
Trying to balance out, like, we kind of look at it two ways. Like an on snow demo is a consumer demo. Like, we're introducing the brand and product to new consumers, and we're hoping to inspire them to consider buying Wonder Alpine. And then there's community events where it's almost like we're honoring those who have already bought the brand, and we want to provide them with a kind of a unique full access experience to the people behind the brand in terrain that maybe we honor to be good ski testing terrain, for example. And that's kind of like the Roost event. So like, how do we create a greater balance to not just only be community focused, where we're constantly investing in post-consumer, post-transaction consumers and honoring them for their contribution, but rather also spending the time while we are geographically out there to introduce new users to the brand and have some of those new experiences. And in this regard, of course, we'll be relying on mechanized skiing. There's just no other alternative that's as efficient as setting up a tent at the bottom of a popular ski run at an awesome ski area and letting people come and try your stuff. So there'll be a bit of that in the future, and hopefully people don't call me a hypocrite, because it is what it is. We need quick turns on skis. We don't want to make somebody, try a ski for the first time and have to go walking, 2 miles and climb 2,200 feet to get one run on it. We can get that experience within a half hour at the resort.
Well, but I thought that was one of the things with Wonder skis is that they are a incredibly versatile and a real ski. I mean, they're not just an uphill ski. They actually ski like a good ski. I mean,
Yeah,
they are a good ski, and you know, and that's the thing is they perform well downhill and they perform well uphill. And if you want to slap a pair of Alpine bindings on them, they'll do just as fine as a,
yeah,
you know, a downhill specific ski.
absolutely. And I mean, that's also a lot of the environment which we test them in.
Hmm.
We don't
Hmm.
only test these new prototype skis with touring bindings. I mean, that's honestly the last binding we put on.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, I mean, the very last like product test we'll do is like, how does that ski with a pin binding? We need to make sure that ski, can really, hold its own. And we almost immediately always put an Alpine demo binding on the skis. And we run them up to the resort and really feel that edge and really feel that flex and try to really dial in those primary characteristics. And then as we start to really manipulate construction and look at areas where we can optimize strength for weight, will we also then start to optimize performance for lighter weight bindings?
Hmm.
So, as you said it, that's the voice we're going to amplify. We're just not going to amplify our internal voice about how well the ski inbounds, just because our voice needs to stay in its lane.
Right.
It's not that we're elitist and don't use mechanized travel. Of course we do. And we honor our community for using it as well. But in terms of our marketing, you kind of have to have your voice, and our voice is going to be primarily the time that we ask for consumers to listen to our storytelling. We want to be inspiring them to go out and explore the backcountry under their own power, you know. And we get it that like, hey, we maybe only have 2 minutes of their time today, so let's make sure we give them the best 2 minutes that we have to offer.
Hmm.
And if they're curious from a product review point of view, how do these skis ski as a 50-50 split inbounds versus backcountry? We'll have those reviews up on the website, and we appreciate all the contribution that we get from the community for writing those things, and we'll amplify those testimonies using their voice. It just won't be ours.
Right. Right. Cool.
Yeah, man.
That was excellent, Matt. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, dude. No, it's killer. I mean, shit, we haven't had a chance to speak in a long time, and I know
Yeah,
we
it's been a
wanna,
couple
I
years.
know I know we wanted to talk about backcountry lodges as well, and I think maybe that's a part two.
Yeah.
Uh, because once I get talking about backcountry lodges, I'm gonna get super carried away. And a lot of that's probably gonna be badgering you with questions I have about what are your favorite backcountry lodges, as you definitely are more of the expert in that regard, to balance out this conversation. So maybe we should do a role reversal part two. Matt interviews Connor about what is his favorite backcountry lodge experiences,
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
because I'm certainly anxious to experience some new zones, in complement to the zones that I've loved and journeyed out to in the past. So let's make sure we get that on the books here shortly, and we'll stay in touch as we get near the cooler temps and find ourselves back on skis again this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any plans for skiing anytime soon, or are you just status quo in the Wasatch there?
Yeah, I mean, definitely have considered booting up, maybe this weekend, but nothing that's going to be overly objective. Maybe just for the novelty that we still have the snowpack, and fingers
You have a fair
crossed.
bit of snow up there still.
Yeah, fingers crossed it returns again as well as it did this year, next year. But not trying to just brush off that like this is the new norm, because it certainly wasn't. And the record books show that this was something pretty special. And if I could go get a couple extra turns off the road, I'd probably be kicking myself in a couple of years if we shift back to a hot and dry that I didn't take advantage of it. But
Yeah, fair enough.
as of right now, man, I'm gonna actually step out and go to the gym and try to get my body to where I need it to be so that I'm ready to rock come winter.
Nice. Yeah, right on. Well, I
Yeah, man.
appreciate your time, Matt. And is there a way that you could like share this
Yeah,
interview? Because like I'd like to put it up on my YouTube channel for you guys so that you get some
of
I'm not
course.
just bullshitting with you for an hour.
No, 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 of course. I'll stop recording now.
Cool.